sinister crime committed in the mid-20th century near Birmingham has put the police in a deadlock. Numerous clues help to establish neither the identity of the deceased nor the name of her killer. Was this woman the victim of a fatal coincidence, a cult ritual, or fear of the locals before her witchcraft charms? We analyze the most popular versions and tell you where the phrase "who put Bella in the witch's elm" came from, which will always be associated with the most frightening murder of Great Britain. On April 18, 1943, 4 teenagers found themselves near Lord Cobham's estate. Despite the danger of being caught by their evil master, the boys were making their way through the dense woods of Hagley Wood in an attempt to distract themselves from the nightly bombing raids of the German Luftwaffe, wreaking havoc in their native Birmingham, and to find food. A dead rabbit, or wild bird eggs, would have been a rare hearty meal for the 4 of them. Luck was not on their side that evening. The frustrated teens were about to head home when they suddenly came upon the witch elm, an ugly tree with protruding branches that was notorious among superstitious locals. One of the boys, 14-year-old Bob Farmer, had the idea to search the elm tree for nests. He suggested that his friends follow his example, but they refused. Bob called them cowards and went in alone. He immediately noticed something white in the depths and began to clear away the leaves. Finally, he picked it up and sighed disappointedly. It was a white skull with empty eye sockets. He thought he had found the remains of an animal, of which there were many in the forest. In short, nothing remarkable. But remembering how his friends had been frightened by his suggestion to explore the witch tree, he decided to play a joke on them. With a wild shout, Bob jumped out of the branches and threw the skull he had found at his companions. This had the desired effect. The boys also shouted and scattered. Bob laughed loudly. He was obviously pleased with himself. But when he looked at the moonlit skull lying in the grass, a chill ran down his spine. No, it wasn't the remains of an animal. The strand of long hair stuck to the skull and the long crooked teeth clearly indicated that Bob had found what had once been a human head. Now, everyone was scared. The friends decided to stuff the skull back into the elm tree, return home, and tell no one about their creepy nighttime adventure. But one of them, 17-year-old Tommy Willits, was so horrified by what had happened that he decided to share the story with his parents. Soon the police arrived at the witch's elm. Quite quickly they found an almost complete human skeleton inside the trunk. All that was missing was a hand. But a couple of days later she was found for some reason buried separately a few meters away from the tree. In addition to the bones, police found fragments of clothing, blue shoes, size 35.5, and a gold ring. After examining the skeleton, forensic scientist Prof. James Webster concluded that the deceased was about 35 years old and had most likely given birth. Her height was just over 150 centimeters, and a distinctive feature of her appearance was her crooked front teeth. One of them was strongly set on the other. The condition of the victim's jaw clearly indicated that the woman had visited a dentist in the last year of her life. It would have seemed easy to identify the victim by such parameters, but alas, none of the missing women in the area fit the description. While the police were trying to figure out who the murdered woman was, the medical examiner turned in a report on the circumstances of the death. First, he stated that she had been dead for 18 months before her body was found. And second, she was definitely murdered. I can't imagine that the woman happened to be in this spot, the tree trunk, and certainly she couldn't have climbed up here on purpose to commit suicide, James Webster explained. The professor added that the woman was placed in the witch elm before rigor mortis set, and otherwise the body simply wouldn't have fit into the narrow tree trunk, which means the killer killed his victim not far from where her remains were found. So the police had more work to do. Now they had to find out not only the name of the victim, but also her executioner. The detectives began their investigation. They interviewed all the dentists who worked in the county, but none remembered a patient with such an unusual jaw. That lead turned out to be a dead end. So they went after the next piece of evidence, the victim's shoes. They were shoes manufactured by Waterfoot at the Waterfoot factory in Lancashire. Detectives went there and found out which stores had supplied the model of shoe found at the murder scene. Incredibly, they managed to find all the owners of the blue Waterfoot shoes, except for 6 women who had purchased the shoes at a market stall in Dudley, a small town about 18 kilometers from Birmingham. Detectives failed again, but they still had one last clue: the ring. Alas, a thorough examination revealed that it was not gold, only gilded. That is, there was no point in going to the jewelers. The investigation had finally reached a dead end. The trail grew colder every week. After 6 months, the police stopped trying to find out what happened at the Witch's Elm. And the locals began to forget about the gruesome murder, the protracted war, and their own starving children worried them much more than the unknown dead woman, whom no one could help. However, at least one person was concerned that the detectives had given up, and he made his position on this very clear. Shortly before Christmas 1943, an inscription scratched in chalk on Hagley's obelisk near the murder scene read, "Who put Bella in the Witch Elm?" But who wrote those words? How did he know the name of the murdered woman? And why did this unsolved crime disturb him so much? The police were unable to discover the name of the artist, but the mysterious inscription began to appear on other objects, building walls, fences, and monuments. It was always written in the same sprawling and uneven handwriting, so the authorship remained unknown. The last inscription by this artist appeared in 1999. He may no longer be alive. Neither is the murderer of the mysterious Bella, but the story of this woman still fascinates our contemporaries. To find out what happened at the Witch Elm in 1943, we decided to look at the most popular versions. Version 1. Occult Ritual. The British anthropologist Margaret Murray, who was directly involved in the investigation, was convinced Bella was a victim of a marginalized medieval ritual, creation of the Hand of Glory. In this ritual, an arm was cut off from a hanged man. Subsequently, a candle was inserted into it and fermented so that the artifact would solidify. The Hand of Glory was hugely popular with vagrants, robbers, and murderers. It was believed that the artifact could put homeowners to sleep, allowing thieves to carry off anything of value unhindered. In favor of this version worked 3 facts. Shortly before the murder in Birmingham came a tabor of Irish gypsies' paw. All happened in Hagley Wood, according to local beliefs. This forest attracted evil spirits and occultists, and the hand Bella was separated from the body. But why wasn't the ritual completed? And who was the girl who was its victim? Alas, Margaret Murray had no answers. Version 2. Prostitute Bella was the victim of an evil joke. In 1953, in the police station came to the police station one Una Mossop, who claimed that a high-profile crime committed by her husband Jack confessed to her that he had once been drinking with his mate, a Dutchman called Van Ralt, in the local Little Tailton Arms pub. They were approached by a prostitute who introduced herself as Bella. They chatted merrily all evening, after which they got into the car and agreed that the 3 of them would go to a more secluded location for an understandable purpose. On the way, the men noticed that Bella had had a lot too much to drink and decided to prank her. They dragged her out of the car while she was unconscious and threw her into an empty tree in a forested area. After that, according to Jack, he was tormented by constant nightmares as soon as he went to bed. He had a terrible vision, the eyes of an angry woman staring at him from a dark opening in the wood. Soon Jack finally touched his mind and went to the hospital, where he ended his earthly days even before Bella's body was found. This version looked plausible. But like the previous one, it left a lot of questions. Why didn't any of the locals know Jack's Dutch friend? Why didn't Bella take off the ring, sitting down with strange men? And most importantly, why did Una Mossop tell the police everything only 10 years after Bella's murder? Version 3. Bella, a German spy. As we remember, the murder of Bella took place in the midst of the Second World War, so it is not surprising that one of the versions of what happened was a spy. The area around Birmingham was home to British military-industrial factories of particular interest to Nazi intelligence. In 1941, MI5 agents caught a German spy, Joseph Jacobs, who was dropped into the UK from a parachute but suffered a broken ankle on landing. In one of the interrogations, the man admitted that his wife, Clara Bowrell, had been sent along with him. This woman knew Birmingham well because even before the war she had worked part-time as a dancer in local establishments of dubious reputation. But after 1941, her traces mysteriously disappeared. The version that Clara, and became the unfortunate Bella, walled up in the witch elm, gained enormous popularity, but soon inconsistencies were discovered. Judging by the surviving photographs of Frau Bauerl and eyewitness accounts, her height was 180 centimeters. Bella was much lower, and the state of her teeth flawless. In addition, in the post-wartime declassified German documents, in which black and white was written Clara Bauerl died in 1942 in Germany. And finally, the location of the murder of Bella clearly said that here worked not at all special services, and someone from the local residents. Someone who knew the neighborhood and the legends of Hagley Wood. So we come to the most gruesome version of what happened. Version 4. The Massacre of the Witch. By the 20th century, medieval witch persecution seemed to be a thing of the past. But in remote British counties, populated mostly by farmers, superstitious fears of witchcraft and other devils still flourished. Men with torches and pitchforks, upset by poor harvests, preferred to blame their troubles on suspicious neighbors or unexpected strangers who had chosen a bad time to travel through farmland. They were branded witches or sorcerers and then put to a bloody lynching. This is exactly what happened in 1945 in Gloucestershire, where 74-year-old Charles Walton lived. Unsociable old man never liked the local peasants. It was said that he had an evil eye, and his reluctance to receive guests rode off to a passion for dark magic. Therefore, after a bad harvest in 1944, villagers quickly found the guilty in the middle of the night. Mr. Walton was forcibly dragged to the farmer's field and nailed to the ground with pitchforks. A cross was then carved into his chest. The policemen who arrived at the scene of the tragedy were horrified. However, when they came to their senses and remembered about Bella from Witch's Elm, they suggested that both monstrous murders could have a common motive, dictated by the superstitiousness of the locals. Bella may have been a gypsy woman who stayed with her Tabor near Hagley Wood. She was thought to be a witch and was killed in the heart of the Witchwood at the Witch's Elm. This version explains both the choice of location of the massacre and the fact that Bella could not be identified. In ritual murders, locals were usually characterized by amazing solidarity and denied any ties to the victim and lynching. And nomadic tribesmen avoided dealing with the police. So after their gypsy woman went missing, they simply got on their horses and rode away from Hagley Wood. The end. To shed light on the case of Bella could be modern methods of forensics, in particular DNA examination. But here's the strange thing. Recently it turned out that all materials and evidence of the mysterious murder of 1943 were lost after the death of Professor Webster. So alas, we will never know who put Bella in the Witch's Elm after all.